This last step of the eye practice is one of my favorites to work on because I think it makes the biggest difference. This last step is bringing detail back into your portrait. Now, when we posterize our reference picture, this is what it looks like, where you have areas broken up into black, gray, and white tones. However, when your picture is posturized, you do lose a lot of detail. So here's the original reference picture where you can see a lot of detail with the eyelashes. You can see the individual hairs on the eyebrow. There's this line and detail with the eyelid, and you just simply don't have that detail with your picture being posturized. Now, the purpose of posturizing the picture, like I said, is having those values broken up so it's easy to fill in with our color. So at this point, we need to bring this detail back to really make our project and this eye pop and stand out and have more overall refinement and detail. So while I'm working on this, I'm not going to look at the posturized reference picture because there's no more detail than what we already have on our painting. So I'm going to be looking back at the original reference picture. So I have this off to the side the whole time that I'm working with my charcoal. Now, for your final project, it is required that you bring detail back if you have your picture posturized. However, you don't necessarily have to use charcoal for your final project. You'll have the option on the next step when we use acrylic paint to be working with bringing detail back using acrylic paint. You could also try Sharpie or pen, just regular pencil. So lots of ways to do this step, but we're gonna try out charcoal to see what you think and how it is put together. So here's an example of a completed eye with the charcoal. You can see, kind of zooming in on it, that there's details within the eye itself. So there's that texture on the iris there. There's texture and detail on the eyebrow that's not in our original picture. And then there's some of the outline around the eye that's detailed, along with shading. So a little bit of shading done under the eye here, a little bit where the eyelid is, and then the highlighted areas with the white charcoal are really brought out and lightened. So you can see that highlight above the eye, obviously the highlight on the eye itself, the white part of the eye, and then the hair has some texture and details with the black and white charcoal. So let's get started bringing all of that detail into your drawings. The first thing I would do is focus on kind of outlining and touching up around the eye. So looking at our reference picture, we're going to look at this area around the eye to refine first. So I'm going to find where the top of the eye is here, where the eyelashes are, and just bring this around, outlining it all the way down to the corner of the eye here, and then outlining around that, underneath the eye, and then out. And then I'm also going to just outline around the eye here in the middle, so around the iris, and then I'll fill in the pupil. So the outside of the iris is the darkest, so I'm just filling that in, trying not to completely cover up everything that I have for paint as it's more painting based. And then I'm filling in the pupil, and then I can go ahead and bring in some texture. So if you look at your reference picture, you can see some of the lines of texture inside of the eye to bring out those details. So I'm going to be pointing in these lines towards my pupil. I'm not drawing them all the way across. Some are going to be longer, some are going to be shorter than others to get a little bit of that texture. And then I can kind of go over it on the outside, making that the darkest. And again, just pointing those lines in towards the middle. Next, I'm going to go to the eyelid. So this area here is where the eyelid is kind of represented. You'll notice on the reference picture, it's the darkest down here in the middle. So I'm just going to kind of lightly shade and bring this out, and then outline where the edge goes all the way down to the corner of the eye. And then I'm going to move into the eyelashes. You cannot see lots of individual eyelashes coming up. They're kind of angled down more, so I'm just filling this in by shading it darker on the outside, and then I'll add just a few kind of textured lines coming up and a few that are pointing down as well. You can really see the eyelashes on the bottom of the eye the best, so that's what we're gonna do next, is bring in some of those eyelashes under the eye. Just try to avoid drawing a bunch of lines here. Actually look at your reference picture and draw what you see. So there's a few just kind of light lines spaced out for these eyelashes on the bottom. Now the tear duct down here has these two kind of smaller circles or sections that I'm filling in, just shading in the eye a little bit more. It's darker on the outside, so I'm filling that in. And then I'm going to start to look at the shading around the eye. So underneath the eye here is filled in a little bit with charcoal, a little bit of shadow. Can even use my finger to just kind of blur or smudge that shadow so it's not super dark, but you can just kind of get the idea of having that filled in. And then even just a little bit here where the nose would start, getting that filled in. And then I'm gonna move on to the eyebrow. So for the eyebrow, I have my value underneath it. I'm gonna just lightly bring in some texture for the hairs on the eyebrow. You can't see every single individual hair, but I'm just gonna draw kind of a few, and then for the rest, I'm just lightly shading this in. So there's just a few areas where you can actually see some darker lines, especially towards the outsides of the eyebrow. So there's some lines up here on the outside, and then it gets darker, and some lines coming up from the outside on the bottom of the eyebrow. So I'm bringing that out. And then this area here where there's this orange is actually a shadow for the hair. So you can see on the reference picture, this is a shadow, and then the hair starts. So I'm gonna just lightly kind of shade along this edge here and fill in where this shadow comes in and meets with the eye. And then start to add or shade in the hair. So this is all where the hair starts. Just gonna draw some lines up and down for the hair. You'll notice that it's darkest on the outsides and then lighter in the middle. So I'm gonna bring just a few lines in the middle so it's not too dark, and making it the darkest on the outside. So now I have the black charcoal areas refined. What I want to do as my last step is add in some white charcoal. If you have white charcoal available, definitely try this out because it adds a nice step. If not, stop there with the black charcoal because that does bring a lot of detail back alone with just the black charcoal. The white is really just meant to bring in more highlights. So I'm going to start with the lightest highlight, which is right in the eye here, so you can see that white highlight. And then I'm going to look at some of these lighter areas on the eyelid, underneath the eyebrow, and then some of the lighter areas of the hair. So I'm bringing in this highlight first, then looking at other areas that are lighter on the eye. Around the outside of the eye, there's this highlight that comes around, and up here underneath the eyebrow, it is kind of hard to see the white since I use such a light value with my paint, but that's okay. And then just bringing in a little bit of the white underneath the eye and around here, and then some textured lines for the hair. So here's my finished eye. And again, here's another example that you can see all of that detail brought back. Take your time with this step. It definitely is an important step because it's going to really refine everything that you have and tie it all together.